Hi loving soul, welcome back to the show. I'm so happy you're here. If you need more hope in your life with your current relationship situation, then this is the episode for you. Today I'm going to be sharing a very personal story of mine that is a pivotal moment in my life. And even though the whole scenario was an absolute shit show at the time and made me it rocked me to the core and made me question every single thing about myself. It was literally the best thing that could have happened to me. It was the answer to all my prayers, even though at the time I had no idea. And it taught me 3 such important things in my life that I really want to share them with you now. The first thing is that even if we don't understand it at the time, and we just can't see the wood through the trees, everything in our life is a growth opportunity, and our life is always unfolding for us in the best ways to support our growth. The second thing is that there's always hope, always, and our perception of stuckness or dead-endness or lack of hope, it's just a conscious perception. It's not a reality, just a perception. It's just the way we are perceiving our problem to be. But actually, we're thinking about it from the energy of the problem, not the energy of the solution. And that is a very different ballgame. And the third thing is to trust that living in alignment with our own growth and awareness and joy is always the path to a successful life. And by successful, I mean truly happy. So without any further ado, let's get on with today's episode. Have past love relationships brought you anxiety and stress? Maybe you've hit a wall with dating, like, why are all the good ones taken? Even though you're a go-getter, does true love feel unattainable and outside of your control? Hey, I'm Remy, clinical hypnotherapist and my master coach. In this podcast, you will learn how to heal heartache and move on from your past relationships, nurture your inner child, master your mind to work for you instead of against you, live an authentic life that's in alignment with your truth, regulate your nervous system, understand the dynamics of healthy relationships, and attract the loving relationship you truly deserve. 14 years ago, I went from being a codependent, anxious serial dater and marrier of the wrong men until I finally realised I had a lot of work to do. Well, I made it my mission to learn everything I needed from the world's best and did the work, and very quickly met the man I've been waiting a lifetime for. These days, I've got the family and life I dreamed of and use my 3-step framework to help other women claim the same power over their lives. I'm here to expand your belief of what's possible for you. You deserve unshakable self-confidence and a relationship that feels right on every level. It's time to upgrade your subconscious and start some real-life magic happening. So nestle on in and let's get to it. So I know that when you are in a situation where your love life and relationships aren't where you want them to be, it can feel like standing at the bottom of a massive mountain and you don't even know where to begin. When we're feeling this way though, it really is like trying to see reality through a wall in which we have 2 tiny little pinholes looking at our reality. And really what we need to do is knock down as much of that wall as possible so that we can really see the proper reality that's out there for us. There's infinitely more there to see that we're just not fully aware of yet. And the more you become consciously aware of all your unconscious programming and the thoughts that are going on, that is the way that we knock down that wall. And a really good place to start with that is becoming the higher observer of your thoughts and building that muscle of being able to stop and listen to where your thoughts are trending and listen to the beliefs you're having in your head and to really assess whether or not they're truth and where they're coming from. This episode will update your mind and give you the mindset you need to allow you to be a congruent match with your best and highest life. So my story begins when I was around 24, and I just come out of a 4-year relationship with someone who was quite controlling and jealous. He used to get really angry if I wore skirts or spoke with male friends. And eventually he finished it because his mother wanted him to be with someone from the same ethnicity as they are. Well, it was a very up and down, rocky relationship, full of passion, but also full of a lot of hurt and anxiety and worry on my behalf, and a lot of guilt, unfounded guilt. But at the time it felt so real. And by then I just had enough of all the drama and guilt and worrying whether he loved me or not. And I remember so clearly sitting in his car when he finished it with me. And I just had this awakening. I was like, oh, I've been seeing myself as not worthy of being the main woman. I was spending so long worrying whether he wanted me, I forgot to ask myself, do I even want him? I mean, do I really want to sign my whole self up for this life of worrying what someone's going to say to me, making sure they're not upset at what I'm wearing and annoyed about who I'm talking to and what I'd done in the past before I'd even met them. Oh my God, it would have been an absolute nightmare. And I suddenly realized that I had been asking myself all the wrong questions. And I promised myself I would never think that way again. Because something had told me that if I really wanted the family of my dreams, which is something that I've wanted ever since I was little, I didn't have a warm, loving, solid family unit at all. I had parents who hated each other. And although my mum was amazing to me when I was younger, and my grandparents were an amazing, just ball of love. But, between my mum and my dad, oh God, it was awful. My dad had OCD and himself was very controlling and difficult to live with. I was terrified of him until I was 13. I used to have nightmares about him almost every night, even as an adult. I mean, it wasn't a particularly fun childhood. And I remember just seeing, whenever I stayed over at friends' houses, I would see how their dads interacted with them and just realize how different my life was. And it just affected me so profoundly. I knew that I wanted one of those warm, happy homes where there was laughter and people actually liked each other. They didn't just put up with each other. It felt really scary and dangerous at home not because there was domestic violence or anything like that, but there was this sort of cold, icy undercurrent of very conditional love that if you didn't put the right foot in the right place, and it was like walking on ice or walking on broken glass. If you put the one foot in the wrong place, you would be feeling it. You know what I mean? Anyway, so knowing that I really wanted this loving, warm family, I suddenly thought, like, God, if I really want that in my life, I'm going to have to change what I'm putting out there and who I'm with. And I'm going to have to start seeing myself as that woman in that family, the woman I want to be. I didn't know at the time that is exactly how you manifest things, by the way, by living in the energy of what you want to be, living in that vibration and having that in the back of your mind and being that person before your life is reflecting that reality. And it's unbelievable how quickly it manifests when you are in the right vibration and you're a congruent match for what you want. Anyway, but that's what I did at the time. And I realized that I really had to turn this belief of self-worth around. So I did. I booked a fun holiday with some girlfriends. I got a more serious job as a commercial property surveyor in Piccadilly Circus. So I was working in the city instead of this fun, cute marketing job that I had around the corner to my house. It was just easy and fun. And I made sure I went to different places that interested me. And in one of them, I met a lovely man. I actually wanted to set my friend up with him, but it never actually worked out with them. She was seeing this other guy and that was that. But we became friends, and eventually one day he asked me out, and I wasn't really initially sort of attracted to him in that way, to be honest, but he seemed like such a nice guy that he kind of won me over with how friendly he was. So I had a paradigm shift about my worth, and I gave up the belief that love was scarce. And then lo and behold, I attracted a guy who was technically on paper absolutely fantastic. He treated me really well. He introduced me to his parents, and I absolutely adored his sister. He had really fun friends. And he was honestly the opposite of my ex. He wasn't possessive or controlling, and he was very relaxed with his opinion, but he didn't enjoy being intimate. And he seemed so laid back and unjealous that I found myself wondering whether he actually cared that much at all, really. But despite all that, he seemed to have really good intentions. He took me abroad to the Caribbean to meet his parents who lived there, and he was 10 years older than me as well. So I thought, there's no way he's going to be wasting his time for no reason. I met his family, I met his friends. Aside from the whole intimacy piece, it was all looking pretty perfect. And then we got engaged within a year. The problem was, when it was just the two of us hanging out together, I found myself really having quite severe panic attacks. I actually found him really hard to get along with. He was very compliant and didn't seem to have much of an opinion on anything. We went on a beautiful holiday together, and I couldn't swallow. I had this lump in my throat, and I just couldn't stop crying. And to make it worse, I was reading Twilight at the time, which made me even more pissed off that our sex life was so non-existent. But his family were lovely, he was kind, and I really thought it was more than I deserved. Who was I to knock this gift horse in the mouth? Someone who was pretty much perfect on paper. And here I was trying to pick holes in it. Yeah, my self-worth was triggered and floundering in the face of this confusing mess I had manifested. So what did I do? Well, I did what any only partially resolved, unconsciously codependent human would do, and I married him. I was on my best friend's hotel bed hours before the wedding, taking diazepam and eating McDonald's. It's not the best way to start a wedding. And I was telling myself, it's just normal nerves, right? Well, they weren't, and they never left me. And needless to say, marriage really didn't enhance our sex life. He made it very clear that he was not willing to go there. And I started to think I was the problem. Even though I was young and hot and like 25, I just felt like frumpy Remy trying to look good and failing. Anyway, I decided to try and reduce my work to part-time so we actually got to see each other, because he used to work nights and I used to work during the day full-time. So really we never saw each other at all, which is probably why it lasted the year that it did last, to be honest. Anyway, I have to tell you, the more I saw him, the more lonely I felt and the more distant I felt from him than ever. There is nothing quite as lonely as being with someone who is not for you. I would be sitting next to him at night on the couch, and it should be a lovely, warm, fun, Sunday night, the one night of the week he had off. And it just used to make me freeze with anxiety. Like there was something so wrong that my unconscious was trying to present to me, and I just wasn't listening. It was like he couldn't really give a real toss about me. He was very polite, but there was just nothing under the surface. There was no real attraction, no real friendship, no real communication, and no real laughter. It honestly really sucked. Anyway, fast forward a few months to I went away with a girlfriend for the weekend and found myself dreading coming home. And it really shook me up. The feeling really shocked me. I felt more anxious than I have ever felt in my life. And it's interesting. On our first day away, I completely forgot my PIN number to my bank card. And it was like my unconscious was just trying to tell me to move on. I could not remember it for the life of me. It was the strangest thing. Anyway, on holiday, I really thought about it, what I needed to do, because it couldn't go on this way. And I knew what I had to do. So I finished it with him the moment I got home. And you know what? He didn't even try to win me back or convince me otherwise. He just wrote a letter to my mum saying that he knew he'd never make me happy. So he moved out. I gave him back his grandmother's engagement ring. And that was it. Done. Marriage over. Just like that. Sitting on my bed in my house all alone, I felt like I had been kicked off a cliff. I was completely flawed. How had I got here? I'd improved my sense of self-worth. I started asking myself the right questions, like, do I like them? Not, does he like me? And there I was, still having barked up the wrong tree in a very big way. But had I really listened to my feelings and emotions? No. Had I trusted my identification of the red flags? No. Had I married the warm, loving, self-aware and emotionally resolved partner I really wanted? No. Had I acted out of fear of not finding a better match and questioning what was available to me? He was unemotional and not in touch with his truth. And I realized, oh my goodness, he was as emotionally stunted as my father. And I always swore I would never, ever, ever end up with being with someone who was like my dad. As I told you before, he really suffered with OCD and had a terrifying temper. Just a tiny example of the experiences he put me through was when I was about 13, I used to be at home on the phone to my friends. And we had this weird phone system where if you pulled out the phone line from the downstairs main socket, it turned off the whole phone system in the house. And he used to just come in and just do that without any warning, without telling me to get off the phone, nothing. Just when he thought it was time for me to get off the phone, he used to just whip out the socket so that the line would just go dead the other end. It was so embarrassing. And I didn't dare say anything because I was absolutely terrified of him. But that's the kind of, vibe that we had in the house. It was not fun. I just felt like I was in the wrong all the time, even though I was such a people pleaser and such a good girl. Oh my goodness me. Don't get me wrong, my ex wasn't like that in that kind of emotionally abusive way, but he certainly was as emotionally distant as my father. And then once I had that realization, I was like, oh no, what if that's all I was comfortable with? They say you marry your trauma. So what if I married someone who was as emotionally distant because I didn't know how to be in a relationship with a man who was otherwise? No way. I didn't want a repeat of any of that. And that moment is where my work truly began. I knew that I had to lift up that huge, stinking rug and peek at all the trauma that I had been sweeping under it since childhood. What had I learned about myself from my parents? What had I learned about love? What had I learned about healthy relationships? What anger was I hanging on to? Whose happiness and pain had I been burdening myself with? What did I believe was possible? What did I want to choose to believe was possible? And how could I make it a reality? These questions were pivotal in my life. Just being consciously aware of them was such a gift, even if I didn't fully have all the answers and hadn't quite embodied them yet. Their answers helped me to develop conscious awareness of my codependency and how to spot my unconscious programming and beliefs, and then reassess and change the ones that weren't serving me. I somehow attracted the right books and the right mentors and the right teachers and the right healers. And I put together a timeline of my past relationships. It was really helpful. And I really assessed them and what they had in common. It was very uncomfortable, but profoundly eye-opening to see how I had been having these toxic relationship patterns over and over again. And it was just like history repeating itself every time. And I felt like it was my unconscious just knocking on my door saying, hey, you have stuff to deal with, like, deal with it. And then I really studied my parents' relationship and what they had taught me about love. And I realized that I'd always been trying to win my father's love very unsuccessfully, or at least I perceived it that way as a child. And that's where a lot of my lack of self-worth came from, this belief that I wasn't lovable because my father had rejected me and didn't really show me the love that I needed as a child. And just realizing that, and then more than that, looking at his childhood and the reality that he had. He went to a really harsh boarding school from, I think he was like 6 years old, and they still had flogging back then. It was in Sussex in England, and his mother was pretty cold, to be honest. I mean, I think you had to be to send a 6-year-old off to boarding school unless you really had to, and they didn't really have to. And so no wonder he couldn't get in touch with his emotions. So it all made sense. And I really looked at him as a child and held him in the palm of my hand and just gave him lots of love. And I felt profound forgiveness. And for the first time, I didn't have these horrible nightmares anymore. I mean, it cleared up the nightmares that I had of him. I wasn't frightened of him anymore. I just had, feelings of empathy for him, really. And after that, I assessed more about how I was perceiving myself, and I swore I would never ignore my emotions or feelings again, because my true self knew that none of this was right. That's why I was always carrying so much anxiety and negative feelings in all my emotions, because on some level I knew that these relationships weren't right, and I knew what I was bringing to the table wasn't quite right either. There's something off. That codependency. Nothing good ever comes from a codependent relationship. And by codependent, I mean I needed somebody to just validate my self-worth all the time. And I used to just live for them and put all my needs aside and all my shit aside and just make my whole life about them. And that requires, it's a big burden for someone to carry. And I was never really being myself, because I was always so worried about whether or not someone would love me, that I used to try and make myself into the person that I thought they wanted me to be. And there's just no there. There's no, that's not real. That's actually deceptive. And so of course it always felt wrong. I mean, it's such a stressful, yucky way to have a relationship. The much better way to have a healthy relationship, and I had to completely relearn all this as well, because it's never really been modeled to me. I mean, my grandparents had a beautiful relationship, but it's hard to really get an understanding of the full dynamics of a relationship when you're not really living with people. All I used to see was them just being sweet and funny to each other, and my grandpa driving my grandma mad in a sweet way, and my grandma just, loving on my grandpa, and they had beautiful lives and they got on with doing their own things in their lives. He loved being a mason and swimming and playing bowls, and she loved playing bowls, and they played bridge together, and they had their own friendship groups. They were such a lovely couple. I miss them so much every day. But apart from that, I had no models of a healthy relationship in my life at all. And I had to really learn again what a healthy relationship even was. Like, what were my benchmarks? I didn't know about the 5 factors back then. This relationship with my ex and this whole moment in my life of pondering and doing all this work, this is where I came up with these 5 factors: the friendship, the respect, the trust, the attraction, the congruent values and beliefs. I didn't have many of them in this relationship, and it was fascinating once I learned them to just go back through all my old relationships and see all the roots that were missing. And it was just so obvious looking back. And of course, doing it in a loving way, not in a judgmental way of yourself. But I learned so much from all of them. And, just like I did with my dad, I have a lot of love for my inner child. And just like you should for you and yourself as an inner child, your own inner child, because everything that your inner child learned as a child, you carry up with you. You see the world through their eyes back then, and you bring all that with you into adulthood. And at the time, we were just trying to survive as children. We saw the world around us, and we tried to build this instruction booklet for life to survive and keep us living and keep us connecting and keep us included in the family. And we learned all these weird beliefs and what we thought were truths that we used to execute. And when it worked, we thought, oh yeah, that's been validated now, I'll keep acting in that way, even if it just no longer serves us as an adult, and actually becomes quite destructive as an adult, i.e. people-pleasing behaviours, or worrying all the time if they like you and how you can change yourself to be more likeable. All those things are such toxic relationship patterns that really we can just drop, because real love doesn't have to be earned. Real love comes from when you are living your best and highest life, and all the segments of your life are in your conscious awareness. You've got your health and fitness, you've got your career, you've got your passions, you're living in love and service, you have got your friends, you have got family, or you've got interesting hobbies that you're doing. You're very aware of yourself and your self-worth and your story. You've got a conscious story that you've made about yourself, and all these things line up. And then you can start living as this person that you want to be, with none of this ego backchat getting in the way, but formed from all these untrue beliefs that we formed as children. And when you get into that space, that is when we attract in everything we want in our life. As I said before, we don't get what we want, we get what we are. And when you are living in that way and you are a congruent match for the life that you want energetically, that is when you bring it in. And the way I think of it is, like, in the back of my head, like I was saying before, I just get this vision, this image, this perception of what I want to be. And I live in that way. And it's just like how athletes become top of their game. They haven't won the race yet, but they imagine themselves doing it, and then they do it. It's incredible how the human mind works. And that is exactly how I ended up manifesting the gorgeous husband I have now. It felt like a miracle, but it was no accident. And if you're wondering how a limiting belief presents itself, well, it usually shows up as like a block in our life. So something that we want to achieve, but somehow or other we just can't, and it's causing us some sort of negative emotional feeling. And when that comes up, that is a very good indication that your unconscious mind is telling you that you have got something blocking you, some untrue belief that you need to just uncover and reassess and turn over and tweak and look at from a new perspective, to turn it into something that is much more aligned with the truth and that serves you much better as the adult and the life you want to have now. If you would like help at all with uncovering and turning over and changing your belief system, that is exactly what I do with my clients. We delve deep into their beautiful unconscious minds and work through life coaching and NLP and EFT tapping and hypnotherapy and hypnoanalysis, all these incredible tools to get to the bottom of what's really impacting people's lives in a negative way and turning it around. And I tell you what, the transformation is incredible. The difference it makes is, it never ceases to amaze me. And then when you have these beliefs turn around, you're then able to go ahead and just start living this incredible life just with such ease and joy. And what falls into your lap is just nothing short of miraculous magic. If you'd like to book in for a one-on-one session with me, send me an email and I'll send you back my session menu. My email address is remy@herloveupgrade.com. I'll leave the email link in the show notes. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got something that you needed from today's episode. Take care until next time. Bye. You should be so proud of this courageous, incredible journey you are on. And I'm so happy to be here supporting you to say goodbye to toxic relationships and claim the wonderful life and love you truly deserve. If you have a friend who you think needs to hear today's episode too, why not spread the love and share it with them? Sending you so much love in abundance. Until next time.